I know this is a hard topic, but I really want to dig into it because there are genuinely people crying out to God right now who are in pain in their marriage and don't understand what it is, and they're suffering without a name to it. And you now have a name. You now have a message that you can give to them. Either share the show, or you can just say, hey, Google this topic. It might be what's going on with you. But what do I do if I'm actually married to someone who's an intimacy anorexic? Now, if you are the intimacy anorexic, it can be hard to admit that, to be honest about that, because being bad is really hard for intimacy anorexics. So I would say start with getting materials on intimacy anorexia like we're offering today. The book and the workbooks are a great start, okay? You can Google it. You can YouTube it, okay? There's lots of information out there on intimacy anorexia today that wasn't out there 10 years ago, all right? You don't have to suffer in silence. I remember when I started my career and I was working with sex addicts, the church wasn't ready for that. And there was no information. There were no books when I started to get clean. Now there's lots of them, and the church is accepting it, okay? In years, every church could have an intimacy anorexia group because it's so prevalent, especially with the technology. And the kids are growing up not connected to relationships, but connected to a thing, a phone, a tablet, okay? So I think this is going to get worse, so be prepared. Consider getting into a support group. This is really, really helpful because you can heal. If you're an intimacy anorexic, you can start an intimacy anorexia group or find out where there is one. And it might be virtual or on the phone, or it might be local, okay? Addictions don't heal by themselves. And you're going to want and need someone that you can talk to and be accountable to so that you can start healing. Scripture says if we confess our faults one to another, well, you need another person to confess your faults so that you can be healed. And you want to love your spouse consistently and intentionally. If you're an intimacy anorexic, you know how to love them. They've told you, and start working on that moving forward, okay? They should never have to ask or beg to be loved. They've already shown you the way. Now, if you're a spouse of intimacy anorexic, okay, you want to get informed on the intimacy anorexia. That's going to help you to understand what you've been through. The sin of withholding could be helpful. And all the intimacy anorexic products we're talking about today on the show. And the married and alone materials, okay? There's a lot of that on our website, and you should start there. Now, the married and alone is different, okay? It's like if you have the alcoholic, okay, the 30s, 40s, and 50s in American culture, there was AA, but then there became the Al-Anon version, what happens to the spouse, okay? The married and alone is what's happened to you as a spouse. Now, our research, we have a whole book called Partner Betrayal Trauma, and it really focuses on three types of, this is women, but men suffer the same thing. Because if you're a man and you're living with intimacy anorexic, you are in as much pain as any woman. You try being loved, you try doing romance, nothing seems to work. You can't get initiation unless you're yelling and screaming and threatening, and you just can't get that thing to move. Okay, so if you're a man, you're in pain too, and this married alone materials are for both genders. So you probably want to get those and to get started on the information in the Married Alone book. Men and women contribute their stories. Okay, so you're just as much pain if you are married to someone with intimacy anorexia. So you want to get informed about that. There are materials on that. There's support groups, real and virtual and telephone that you could probably find and get into those kind of things. But you're going to want also to have some help. And then this is where the trauma starts. I start talking about our research on that. And in the Partner Betrayal Trauma, we had three groups of women, those that were exposed to being married to someone who had a porn addiction, someone who experienced infidelity, and someone who lived with intimacy anorexia. And you would think these are three different groups of ladies and the scores would be all over the place, and it wasn't. We went through about 9 to 12 different scales. These are scientific scales measuring different things. And generally, they're within 1 or 2 points of each other. So the trauma of living with intimacy anorexia is real. It's as real as infidelity, and it affects the woman, and I would suggest men, but the research was with women, in exactly the same way that infidelity does, or that pornography does. And so if you're withholding and you think you're not impacting your spouse, our research shows that's not true. Because it's not the what of the trauma, it's the who of the trauma. And if your spouse is withholding intimacy, that's traumatic as cheating because you're staying married to yourself as an intimacy anorexic, not married to them. You're not nurturing, connecting to them. You're trying to protect you. And if someone's married to themselves in a marriage, it's very painful. for the other person. So married alone, get the materials, get support, understand you didn't cause it. Like, if you marry someone with an alcohol addiction, they brought this in. Maybe you didn't know it, maybe there's strength occasionally, but now it's a problem because the addiction continues to get worse and worse and worse. I can't tell you how many couples have told me on their wedding night it changed. They weren't intimate on their wedding night. And that started the whole intimacy anorexia pattern in their relationship. Okay, and a lot of pain with that because they thought they got this guy or this gal who was all about being in love and connected in their dating relationship. The night of the wedding, boom, doors closed. You're not getting my heart. You're not getting my body. I'm going to push you away. You can stay as long as you want. And all of a sudden, you're like in trauma. Like, what just happened to me? I mean, I've heard this 100 times, okay, over the years of working with intimacy anorexic. So here, I'd like to talk about the hope. I'm a psychologist, and people have for many years flown in from all over the country and world to come see me. And part of it's for specifically intimacy anorexia. And I have seen the miracle of recovery again and again. I've seen where a man or woman stands up and says, yes, this is me. This is what I do. It is wrong. It is sin, and I want to work on it. And if the spouse is able to do that process, he or she would work on their married alone, heal from that, the trauma of neglect, and do the work, and that's fine. And I see so many happily ever afters. I also see, car wrecks, where someone says, nope, not me, not doing it. You can just stay. I'm never going to love you. They don't say I'm never going to love you, but the behavior says, I'm not going to show up for you. Whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the marriage, okay? And so there can be hope for anyone who's struggling with any addiction, okay? There's recovery for everyone. If you're struggling with intimacy anorexia, get today's offer, are married and alone. We want you to heal. This is a very silent, secret, stealth sin that's in the Church of Jesus Christ. And God is saying, enough. Heal. Be free. I love you. I want you to break open that heart towards your spouse. I want you to experience what it's like for me to love somebody through you. And that is the cry of God, that we would love someone like that. So please get the stuff and get a group and get moving.